Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our live coverage of the latest mission from Cape Canaveral Spaceport Station. Will Robinson Smith will be providing our commentary for the duration of this coverage. We are broadcasting, as we always do, from the Spaceflight Now News Bureau here at NASA's Kennedy Space Center. As we are kicking things off with this live coverage, of course, not the mission coming into this morning that we were hoping for, anticipating to be covering with you all. Obviously, we were all tracking the Polaris Dawn mission, but just for a brief overview of where things stand with that, if you were asleep or otherwise occupied and missed the news and updates, SpaceX has pushed that mission back to no earlier than Friday morning. And that's because this is a 5-day mission for the Polaris Dawn crew. And so not only do they need to track the weather at liftoff, the weather along the abort zones as they climb uphill, but they also need to keep track of the weather for splashdown on the backside of the mission. And unfortunately, the weather on the backside of the Polaris Dawn flight, were they to launch today, well, just didn't quite look good. And that was the case for both today's launch opportunity as well as Thursday, August 29th. So SpaceX and the Polaris program are standing down until at least Friday morning at the earliest. Of course, they will continue to assess as things roll along. Taking a live look right now at the Falcon 9 in the big box over at Launch Complex 39A, waiting to launch. Falcon 9 on the right-hand side of your screen, that is our mission du jour now that Polaris Dawn is standing down. The first of what SpaceX plans is to be potentially a Falcon 9 double header between its two coasts. First up is this Starlink 8-6 mission, set to lift off in just a little bit more than 56 minutes. Our Stephen Young is providing technical support for the broadcast tonight. Our Adam Bernstein has the evening off, but Michael Caine is out with us tonight. If you'd like to keep up with the photography of the fellas, you can find them over on X, formerly known as Twitter. Michael Caine is at MD Caine Jr., Adam Bernstein at ABurnNYC. You can follow Spaceflight Now simply at Spaceflight Now. If you're not on X, you can find us also on Facebook as well as Threads. We'll be joined in support for our coverage tonight by our friends Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions as well as Chuck Briggs. Tonight's mission is the Starlink 8-6 flight, a batch of 21 Starlink satellites nestled into the payload fairings atop this Falcon 9 rocket, 13 of which will include the direct-to-cell capability. As far as the payloads for these back-to-back Falcon flights between the Cape and Vandenberg, it's a wash, rinse, repeat situation, and I believe the first time that we'll see direct-to-cell satellites in back-to-back missions launch on the same day. This particular mission, also the 58th dedicated Starlink mission launching in 2024, This will be the 121st time that SpaceX launches the Starlink V2 Mini variety. Currently, SpaceX is targeting a T0 liftoff time of 3:48 a.m. Eastern. It's 07:48 UTC for our friends joining from around the world. Certainly appreciate the more than 1,100 of you who are joining with us live. Know it's sort of an odd hour of the morning, so appreciate you either staying up late or getting up early if you're here in the United States. But see, we've got Prime joining in from Norway, so perhaps a more reasonable time of day. Be sure to hop in the live chat. Let us know where you're joining in from. Always good to see where folks are watching. If you haven't already, certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us as well. Lots more folks to find their way into our live coverage as we continue to roll on. Want to thank our moderators, Callistia Lee and Stephanie B, for helping us out this morning, keeping things kosher in the live chat. Also powered by a wonderful channel member community here on YouTube. So thanks to folks like I Am Lita, Mira Ben, Justin Dawson, Zephyr Wolf, SE Aviation, Bruce Barclay, Ryan Snyder, and many others. Channel membership comes with a number of perks, including discounts at our online shop, that is shop.spaceflightnow.com, access to member-only videos, and of course, the ability to watch all of our launch liftoff moments from here at the Cape in 4K. I want to welcome aboard Z Granitus, joining us with channel membership at the mission specialist level. And thanks to Callistia Lee for gifting 5 Spaceflight Now memberships. Appreciate that generosity. So to our newest 6 channel members, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. Last but not least, if you have a comment or question about this mission or other happenings in the realm of spaceflight, and your comment or question is appropriate to be read on the show, we'd love to bring you into the chat as we're continuing to count down towards the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. You can use the YouTube Super Chat feature. Not only will you be giving us some interesting things to talk about during the countdown, but you'll also be supporting what we do here at Spaceflight Now, and we will certainly appreciate that. See some folks in the live chat suggesting perhaps a coffee to get things going or asking how I'm doing. It's very kind. Uh, it's a little bit too early for a caffeine drip, at least for me here. But otherwise, feeling fine, raring to go. Hope all of you are doing well as well. Currently T-minus 49 minutes, 34 seconds and counting. Let's go ahead and talk about the countdown timeline, the events that are coming up for us here as we continue to step on through the count, prepare for the liftoff of this Falcon 9 rocket. About T-minus 38 minutes is the point at which the SpaceX launch director will verify their go for the start of propellant load. SpaceX does an electronic poll, so if they feel like they're in a good position to move forward, they can take that poll a little bit ahead of time, but about T-minus 30 minutes is the point at which they make the call. to move forward. Fueling starts 3 minutes later. The couple of events, they'll load RP1 or rocket grade kerosene on board the Falcon 9's first and second stages. At the same time, liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage. About T minus 30 minutes, they'll start loading cryogenic helium onto the pressure vessels on the Falcon 9's first stage. The helium is used to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same process starts a few minutes later on the second stage. You may recall there was a helium issue on the ground side that caused the scrubbing of the Polaris Dawn mission for Monday morning, or Tuesday morning, I should say. That has since been resolved, and now just the weather stands in the way of launching that mission. Moving on the count, T minus 23 minutes, the loading of second stage kerosene concludes. About T minus 20 minutes, 50 seconds, the strong back chill down process begins. Manifests itself in what we know as the big vent at about T minus 20 minutes, 20 seconds. The process itself starts T minus 20 minutes and 50 seconds. They're thermally conditioning the feed lines ahead of the next event here. T minus 60 minutes, second stage liquid oxygen loading gets underway. Moving on to T minus 7 minutes, the children of the 9 Merlin engines begins. That process involves flowing a small amount of liquid oxygen through the plumbing and turbo pumps, helps protect them from the risk of thermal shock and damage during the startup sequence. About a minute later, the first stage kerosene tank is full. And T minus 4.5 minutes, the strong back retract sequence begins. It starts with the clamp arms underneath the payload fairings opening up, and then the transporter erector, the strong back, will recline about 1.5 degrees away from the Falcon 9 rocket. It stays in that position until liftoff. At that point, pulls back in a much more rapid fashion to clear the way for the vertical climb of the Falcon 9. About 3 minutes before liftoff, the first stage liquid oxygen tank is full. A minute after that, second stage LOX load wraps up, at which point Falcon 9 is fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. In the final 60 seconds, control of the countdown is handed over from the ground sequencer to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are brought up to flight pressure. SpaceX launch director will give their go for launch at 45 seconds out. The engine ignition command is issued at T minus 3 seconds. And if all 9 engines are healthy, ignite. The command will be issued for the hold down clamps to release the Falcon 9 for a T0 liftoff. Again, that is coming up at 3:48 a.m. Eastern, 07:40 UTC, in T minus 45 minutes and 9 seconds. Only T minus 42 minutes, 9 seconds and counting. About 4 minutes away from the rough time when SpaceX will make the call to start a prop load. As we're waiting that, let's go ahead and talk about where this Falcon 9 is going to be headed once it leaves the pad. Let's talk a little trajectory, shall we? This Falcon 9 rocket lifting off from Space Launch Complex 40 over at the Cape, or Slick 40. Heading up to the eighth shell in the Starlink constellation means it's going to be heading in a northeasterly trajectory once it takes off from the pad. So if for those watching in the northeastern section of Florida, Georgia, the Carolinas on up, or if you got some friends or family in that area, you might want to nudge them awake. And if they're rocket fans, maybe be able to catch the Falcon 9 in flight if the weather is good enough where they are. Following stage separation, the Falcon 9 first stage booster is going to be landing on the SpaceX drone ship, a shortfall of Gravitas. Note for the record that shortfall Gravitas was the drone ship that SpaceX listed as supporting the Polaris Dawn mission. SpaceX, when it published its launch information regarding this mission, said that shortfall Gravitas would now be supporting this Starlink flight. So there may have been an adjustment given the scrub and just had the drone ship reposition itself in order to support this mission. If that's the case, then likely the other East Coast based drone ship, just read the instructions, will be repositioned when they decide to move forward with the launch of Polaris Dawn, and it'll be downrange, ready to catch that booster when that mission gets the go ahead. SpaceX also endeavors to recover the payload fairings, which splash down into the support of parachutes. An important part of SpaceX's business model. They save about $6 million per recovery effort, so it's important to get those back and refurbish and reuse them as much as they can. SpaceX is in the process of certifying both its first stage boosters as well as these payload fairings for up to 40 flights. This is what it looks like when they bring those fairings on board a recovery vessel. Falcon 9 first stage that's supporting this mission is actually going to be flying for a 23rd time, becoming the flight leader once again for SpaceX and its Falcon fleet. From a T minus 38 minutes, 38 seconds and counting, coming upon the decision point for SpaceX as far as the start of fueling here. If for whatever reason SpaceX needs additional time and they have not begun fueling, they do have a backup opportunity available an hour from the current T0 time, that is 4:48 a.m. Eastern or 08:48 UTC. Taking a look at our live chat here, I want to thank one of our wonderful moderators, Clistia Lee, for gifting a $10 super chat. Really appreciate that, Clistia. Pitching in for, in her words, Will's Tea and Halls Fund. Hours of commentary on random points in the middle of the night. The Tea and Halls Fund is certainly something that always needs replenishing. So appreciate that, Clistia. Thanks to Dale Tony for a $5 super chat saying greetings from Bostic, Western North Carolina. Wish I was there in person to see this launch. Well, Dale, let us know if you're able to see the Falcon 9 during its climb uphill in North Carolina. there's a chance you might be able to, given the time of night slash morning. Channel member Ryan Snyder with the $5 super chat. Thank you, Ryan, saying keep up the awesome work. Appreciate the support. Michael McRoy with the $5 super chat, another one of our channel members saying go booster 1062, old reliable. Michael went on to gift Spaceflight Now membership. So thanks again, Michael. To our newest channel member, welcome aboard. We're glad to have you with us. And to Mira Ben for gifting a Spaceflight Now membership. Thank you, Mira, for your generosity. Now T minus 36 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Less than a minute and a half away to the start of fueling, assuming SpaceX is prepared to do so. Coming into this launch opportunity, the 45th Weather Squadron forecast pretty good chance of favorable weather today, about 85% chance of good conditions at liftoff. The only concern this morning is the cumulus cloud rule. Fairly light winds here at the press site as we're tracking the rocket's ascent in a little more than 35 minutes. SpaceX is, of course, running its countdown from the Hangar X site here at KSC. It's the facility where they refurbish their Falcon boosters and prepare them for future flights. It also has support from its headquarters in Hawthorne, California. Now T minus 35 minutes counting. At this point, assuming that go ahead was given, SpaceX is now fueling its Falcon 9 rocket. Here's what we're looking for. If you take a look at the Falcon 9, near the bottom of the first stage, you could see a slightly light band. And actually, we don't have to try to use our visual cues here, as we do have word from SpaceX that propellant load has begun for this Pad 40 launch of 21 Starlink satellites. They confirm that range and the weather are both currently go. So I'll still bring your attention back to that point of the Falcon 9 first stage booster. In the next minute or two, we'll start seeing a bit of a frost ring form in that part of the vehicle as the super cold densified liquid oxygen is loaded on board the Falcon 9's first stage tank. As those cool temperatures are loaded on board the Falcon 9, they'll meet the much warmer, more humid Florida air, create a little bit of vapor. You'll see more of that buildup, of course, as fueling rolls on. Currently T minus 33 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Currently T minus 30 minutes, 2 seconds and counting. Happening right now, SpaceX is loading that cryogenic helium we mentioned earlier on board the pressure vessels in the Falcon 9's first stage to pressurize the main propellant tanks during flight. Same process will happen on the second stage in about 4 minutes or so. Taking a look at the live chat, want to thank the now more than 2,300 of you who are joining with us live this morning. If you haven't already, we'd certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button for us. Allows more folks to find their way into our coverage. Also want to thank channel member I'm Lita for a $5 super chat. Good to see you this morning, Lita. Who says, thanks for a great place to share the love of rocket launches with a great group of people. Appreciate all you do. Well, thank you, Lita, for your support of what we do here. Of course, we'll have another launch to talk about a little bit later this morning, closer to your neck of the woods over at Vandenberg. But for now, keeping things here, let's talk about the booster history of number 1062. It's got quite a few launches under its belt, going for flight number 23 today, bringing up that record. So let's go ahead and walk down memory lane before we see this next record-setting flight. This booster goes all the way back to November 5th of 2020. Its first launch was the GPS-3 Space Vehicle number 4, or SV-4, built by Lockheed Martin. This was the fourth of the newer version of the U.S. Space Force's GPS constellation. It has the nickname Sacagawea, named after the Shoshone woman who guided Lewis and Clark on their famous expedition in the 1800s. Another GPS satellite was up next on June 17th, 2021. This was Space Vehicle number 5, nicknamed Neil Armstrong, who, of course, is the first person to set foot on the moon. Launch number 3, as fate would have it this morning, was September 15th, 2021. This was the first time this booster launched humans to orbit. And commander of the Polaris Dawn mission will remember this fondly. This was the Inspiration 4 flight, the first time he went to space on the first all-civilian free flyer mission. Launch number 4 was January 6, 2022. This was the Starlink 4-5 mission, 49 version 1.5 satellites on board. Launch number 5 came on April 8th, 2022. This was the second crewed launch for this booster, sending up the Crew Dragon Endeavour, currently docked to the ISS. This was the Axiom 1 mission, the first private astronaut flight to the International Space Station, first all-private astronaut flight, I should say. Flight number 6 came 21 days, 6 hours, and 10 minutes later on April 29th, 2022. So far, the shortest turnaround time for this particular booster. And that was Starlink 4-16 mission. Next up on June 8th, 22 was the Nilesat 301 flight, the Egypt-based company Nilesat. Flights 8 through 12 were a series of 5 Starlink missions. Those were 4-25 on July 24th, 4-27 on August 19th, 4-36 on October 20th, 5-1 on December 28th, and 5-4 on February 12th through 2023. Flight number 13 was on March 9th of 2023. This was the OneWeb 17 mission, launching a batch of 40 of OneWeb's broadband internet satellites. This was the third and final dedicated launch at the time. We do know now that launch number 20 is actually coming up. That'll be the final collection of the Gen 1 constellation satellites for Eutelsat OneWeb. There were a couple of missions from the Indian Space Research Organization that helped to initially round out the constellation. These next round of satellites, this final round, I should say, will be used according to Eutelsat OneWeb in order to help replenish any of the satellites that fail or need to be replaced. That was followed up by the Arabsat 7B mission, also known as Batter 8, launching on May 27th, 2023. This was a telecommunications satellite built by Airbus for Arabsat, provides C and Ku band coverage for Europe, the Middle East, and Central Asia. And then from here on, we are in Starlink territory. Had Starlink 6-7 on July 28th, 6-23 on October 18th, 6-30 on November 29th, 6-38 on January 29th, coming into this year, 6-44 on March 16th, 6-49 on April 13th, 6-59 on May 18th, and most recently, 10-3 on June 27th. That, of course, brings us to Starlink 8-6 mission getting ready to lift off. T minus 23 minutes, 51 seconds. Just a few minutes here from the start of the so-called big vent as they chill the feed lines heading up to the second stage ahead of stage 2 liquid oxygen load. Only T minus 22 minutes, 18 seconds and counting. Take a look at the live chat. Want to thank David Throckmorton for gifting a Spaceflight M membership, one of our wonderful channel members. Appreciate that, David. And to our newest channel member, welcome aboard. Glad to have you with us. Taking a closer look at the payload on board this Falcon flight. There are 21 Starlink satellites on board. Of those, 13 include the direct-to-cell capability. That'll bring the total launched to date after this flight to 155 of the DTC Starlink satellites. I believe the plan from SpaceX is still to start some beta service of the direct-to-cell capability for customers later this year. It's the 58th dedicated Starlink mission of 2024 as well, and the 121st total launch of V2 Mini satellites. Each of them clocks in about 1,760 pounds, about 800 kilograms. With their solar panels unfurled, they have a wingspan of about 100 feet or 30 meters. They use argon Hall thrusters for in-orbit maneuvering. They're built in Redmond, Washington, near Seattle, and they'll be deployed at about 184 miles or 296 kilometers in altitude at a 53.16 degree inclination. We should be coming upon the start of the big vent here within the next 10 seconds. And there it goes right on time, the start of the so-called big vent. A good visual indication that fueling is moving along on track and on time. This venting will continue until right about T minus 16 minutes and 30 seconds, at which point it will taper off in preparation for second stage LOX load. We're currently T minus 16 minutes, 50 seconds and counting. Coming up on the last 15 seconds or so of the big vent here. Want to thank Tim H for a $5 super chat. Appreciate you, Tim. Says thanks for all the great coverage. Well, thank you for supporting the coverage here. Just the beginning of our overnight launch coverage with this mission. Well-reasoned Superhawk, marking 9 months as a channel member with us. Appreciate you sticking around with us, Superhawk. Saying as always, great job, mods. Please hit the like button, y'all. And yes, tip of the hat to Stephanie B and Callistia Lee for helping to hold things down in the live chat. And I'll echo that. Certainly appreciate it if you could hit that like button to allow some more folks to find their way into our live launch coverage. Certainly appreciate that. And a thanks to Edward Pearson for a $5 super chat as well. Thank you, Edward. Currently T minus 15 minutes, 37 seconds and counting. If you can see, the big vent has wrapped up. Second stage LOX load is now underway. Final big fueling milestone prior to launch this Falcon 9 rocket. Next event, of course, will be the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines at the base of the Falcon 9. It's coming up at T minus 7 minutes. Currently T minus 14 minutes, 7 seconds and counting. Talked about the countdown timeline, the events leading up to T0. Let's talk about the other side of the coin. What happens after this Falcon 9 leaves the pad? After liftoff at 3:48 a.m. Eastern, 07:48 UTC, Falcon 9 will pass through max Q with a point of greatest aerodynamic pressure on the vehicle beginning about T plus 1 minute and 10 seconds. It'll be followed by a few events in fairly rapid succession. We'll see first stage main engine cutoff for MECO, T plus 2 minutes 26 seconds, followed a few seconds later by stage separation. Then the ignition of the Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage, SES1, T plus 2 minutes 36 seconds, capped by the jettison of the payload fairings just before the 3 minute mark. T plus 6 minutes and 12 seconds, the first stage entry burn begins, lasting about 22 seconds in total. After slowing down the vehicle, it'll set up the landing burn to begin just before the 8 minute mark, and first stage booster B1062 is set to make its 23rd landing, T plus 8 minutes and 22 seconds into flight. The Merlin vacuum engine on the second stage will cease firing, T plus 8 minutes 39 seconds, SECO 1. It'll enter into a coast phase until T plus 54 minutes 47 seconds, at which point there will be a brief 2 second burn up into circularize the orbit for Starlink satellite deployment at T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes, 41 seconds. While we've got a view of it, thanks to our friend Pete Carsons with Max Q Productions, figure we take a look at our celestial neighbor. If you can possibly bring it back for just a second, get a great view of Jupiter with eyes on the red spot as well. We'll come back to that in a minute if Pete's able to reestablish that shot. Taking a bit of a step back here, still looking at Jupiter, but you can see its moons both above and below it. Of course, Jupiter going to be a hotspot as NASA is preparing to launch the Europa Clipper mission coming up in mid-October. They'll be launching on a Falcon Heavy rocket. It's an important reason why the Polaris Dawn mission also needs to launch as soon as weather permits so that they can turn over that pad from a Falcon 9 configuration to a Falcon Heavy over at pad 39A. Currently T minus 8 minutes, 25 seconds and counting. Just a little more than a minute away from the chill down of the 9 Merlin 1D engines. Taking a look at our chat here, I want to thank the now more than 5,500 of you who are joining with us live. Appreciate you spending part of your Wednesday morning with us here. I also want to thank uh, Jet Jumanville. Apologies, Jet, if I mispronounced your last name. Appreciate the $2 super chat. Sending some love to Mr. Elon Musk. Michael McGrory with a $2 super chat and some kudos to Pete Carstens with Max Q Productions for a cool shot of Jupiter. And a welcome to Techie Gee joining us with channel membership at the pad leader level. Welcome aboard, Techie. Glad to have you with us. As we prepare to see the Falcon 9 rocket take flight coming up in just a little more than 7 minutes, let's go ahead and take a moment to talk about this particular launch vehicle. Of course, the workhorse rocket for SpaceX stands at 70 meters or 229 feet tall with the payload fairings up top. Has a diameter of 3.66 meters or 12 feet. The majority of that made up by the 2/3 of the rocket at the base, the Falcon 9's first stage. Of course, this particular first stage booster flying for a 23rd time, tail number 1062 in the SpaceX fleet. As you can see in the image on your right, the base of the first stage features the 9 Merlin engines, which burn rocket-grade kerosene and liquid oxygen, producing 1.7 million pounds of thrust. Around the engine compartment are black carbon fiber landing legs that will be used to land the first stage on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. Above the first stage is the inner stage. This is a composite structure consisting of an aluminum honeycomb core surrounded by carbon fiber. In that image on the right, you can see the deployable hypersonic grid fins. These are titanium winglets that provide stability and steering for the Falcon 9 as it comes back through the atmosphere, tail first like a big old dart heading towards the drone ship. At the top of the inner stage are 3 mechanical latches that attach to the Falcon 9's second stage. And at first stage main engine cutoff, high pressure helium is used to release those latches, and automatic pushers ensure clean separation. The second stage engine nozzle is also housed safely inside the interstage adapter until stage separation. Speaking of that second stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9, powered by a single modified Merlin engine called a Merlin vacuum engine or an MVAC engine. It's equipped with a large nozzle, which is optimized for the burns and the vacuum of space. It produces more than 220,500 pounds of thrust and will be fired twice on today's flight, placing the 21 Starlink satellites into their intended orbit. As is the case with the first stage, the upper stage of the Falcon 9 also burns kerosene and LOX. Following the deployment of the Starlink satellites, it will ignite for a third time for a deorbit burn, driving the upper stage back into the atmosphere where it will burn up, helping to eliminate the risk of creating any unnecessary space debris on this mission. Finally, at the top of the rocket are the payload fairings containing the 21 Starlink satellites. Fairings are made up of a carbon composite material. They're 13.1 meters or 43 feet tall, 5.2 meters or 17.1 feet in diameter. 2 halves of the payload fairings will be recovered a little further downrange where the first stage lands on the drone ship, and they gently splash down under parachutes. Now T minus 4 minutes, 9 seconds and counting. The strong back retract sequence is underway. The clamp arms opening up, and the transporter erector will be reclining back a degree and a half away from the Falcon 9 rocket. note just for housekeeping here that the countdown clock for us at the upper right-hand corner, that is ours, that is in real time. What is coming through the SpaceX feed is coming in on looks like about a 8-second delay. So we'll be making our call outs in real time, of course, since our cameras are in sync with reality. We're now T minus 2 minutes, 56 seconds and counting. At this point, the first stage LOX tank should be full.
Stage 1 LOX load is complete.
Yeah, that call for stage 1 LOX load being complete. In about 30 or so seconds, the same will be true on the Falcon 9's second stage. Taking a look at the live chat, want to thank Bob Harley for a $3 super chat. Thank you, Bob. Notorious Chivo with a $2 super chat. Some excitement. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Stage 2 LOX load is complete.
With that call out, you just heard the Falcon 9 is now fully loaded with 1 million pounds of propellant. That extra bit of venting you're seeing beginning here, those are the ground gas closeouts. I want to thank
Gas launch closeouts has started.
Well Reasons or Super Hawk for a very generous $20 super chat saying, "Patch out Jupiter and its moons is worth this plus so much more. Great camera work." Of course, giving kudos to Pete. Appreciate it, Pete. And thanks to QC Part-Time Paranormal for a $5 super chat as well. We are now less than a minute to lift off of this Falcon 9 rocket. You should be hearing the call that the vehicle is in startup momentarily.
Falcon 9 is in startup.
Good call out there from SpaceX. Control, the countdown is now shifting to the Falcon 9's onboard flight computers. The propellant tanks are being pressurized. And with that, have the go for launch from the SpaceX launch director. We are 30 seconds away from liftoff of the first of what SpaceX plans to be a Falcon 9 Starlink doubleheader from both of its coasts. And here we go in 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Engine ignition and liftoff. Liftoff of the Falcon 9 rocket on the Starlink 8-6 mission. The Falcon 9 has cleared the tower. Upon a few different events in fairly rapid succession here. We're First will be first stage main engine cutoff for MECO, T plus 2 minutes and 26 seconds. It'll be followed a few seconds later by stage separation. Second stage engine start, or SES1, T plus 2 minutes 36 seconds, and then fairing separation just before the 3-minute mark. For the call for MVAC chill down, they are thermally conditioning the Merlin vacuum engine prior to its ignition. Now 2 minutes into flight. Now about 10 seconds to MECO. There you see MECO. Stage separation. There goes the Merlin vacuum engine. And you see all those events happening on the SpaceX feed on the right-hand side of your screen from the onboard cameras of the Falcon 9 rocket. There go the payload fairings.
Fairing separation confirmed.
Taking a look at the bid box from our tracking camera here at the press site. A little bit of a jellyfish effect here. Our Michael Caine behind the tracking camera tonight, doing an excellent job. Now coming up into the 4th minute of flight.
Both vehicles are on a nominal trajectory.
Good call from SpaceX there. So far, everything falling along the plan. Now, a little less than 2 minutes away from the start of the first stage entry burn beginning. The Falcon 9 will really slam on the brakes and begin to slow itself down, set up the landing burn. Edge burn begins at T plus 6 minutes and 12 seconds, lasts about 22 seconds in total. If the clouds aren't too much of an issue, we may be able to see the entry burn from our ground cameras here, but can be a little tricky. We are able to snag it. Of course, we'll bring that to you.
Continue to follow a nominal trajectory.
Good call from SpaceX there. Now a little more than 5 minutes to flight.
Both stages on a nominal trajectory.
Good call. Now more than 6 minutes into flight, less than 10 seconds away from the start of that entry burn in real time. Looking for about 6 minutes, 12 seconds on the SpaceX feed.
Stage 1 entry burn startup.
Stage 1 FTS has saved.
Started that entry burn. If you take a look at the speedometer in the bottom left-hand corner of your screen, you can see the Falcon 9 now slowing down quite rapidly.
Stage 1 entry burn shutdown.
See the dot in the center of the big box there. That is the Merlin vacuum engine as it continues its
Both
uphill
vehicles
climb.
following a nominal trajectory.
Now about 156 kilometers in altitude. The landing burn set to begin at T plus 7 minutes 59 seconds.
Stage 1 transonic.
Booster now traveling below the speed of sound. Continuing its descent towards the drone ship. Landing burn is just now beginning in real time. We'll see that in the box in the left-hand corner or the left side of the screen in just a few seconds.
Stage 1 landing burn.
Should see some views of the drone ship on the right
Stage 2 is
coming
in
up
terminal
momentarily.
guidance. Stage 1 landing leg deploy.
Oh dear. Booster 1062 was tipping over and fire was continuing quite prominently. And it appears to have been a failed booster landing.
Seago.
A rare failure by initial visual accounts from SpaceX. Stephen in the back, if we can re-rack that if at all possible, let's try to get that up. We'll get that in work for folks as quickly as we can so we can get another look at that. The last time that a booster failed with a landing connected to the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas, that was back on February 16th of 2021. That was the Starlink 19 version 1 satellites. And that was booster B1059.6 ending that particular run. Just reviewing our statistics on booster history here. Believe that will have been the most recent booster failure upon landing for SpaceX. Of course, the slightly more recent issue that we saw with the booster that was back on December 23rd, 2023, when booster 1058 was returning from its 19th flight. However, it successfully landed on the drone ship but tipped over due to rough seas and fell mid-recovery, so as it was coming back to Port Canaveral, but it was successfully able to land on the drone ship. So yes, the February 16th, 2021 date will have been the most recent full booster landing failure, snapping a run of 267 successful landings in a row for SpaceX. An unfortunate setback for the company. Any mishap is certainly something you never want to see. And of course, SpaceX will go through and thoroughly look at all the data that was gathered during the entry and landing burns, and obviously the touchdown on the booster. We'll wait to see if there's any word from SpaceX on the status of the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas as well. So far, SpaceX has not issued a statement regarding the landing failure. The last comment from them was just acknowledging the launch. Let's go ahead and bring in this replay here. This is starting from the SpaceX feed just after the 8-minute mark. You can see the landing burn started right on time as the booster was making its descent towards the drone ship, a shortfall of gravitas. It appears to hit right in the center of the drone ship. But you can see here an almost purple tinted flame as the booster immediately begins to fall over away from the cameras. We've got it on loop, so we're going to watch this at least a couple more times just to see as much detail as we possibly can. It's hard to tell exactly what might have caused that terminal failure for this particular booster. What was the flight leader for SpaceX? Unlike most booster landings where once it touches down on the drone ship, the engines cease firing, it appears there was a continuous fire and it caused an imbalance of the booster. Of course, much more information is going to be coming from SpaceX in the hopefully not too distant future. We'll get at least an early statement from the company. The other immediate question, of course, is whether or not SpaceX will proceed with the other Starlink flight that it had on tap for tonight. That was Starlink 9-5 set to launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base at 2:58 a.m. Pacific. Given where this mishap happened during this mission, another question that will need to be resolved is if the FAA needs to have any say on this. The last time SpaceX had an in-flight mishap, of course, was on another Starlink flight, but that was concerning the Falcon 9's second stage. Given that this booster was touching down in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean, far from any people, SpaceX could make an argument that this was not an issue of public safety. But certainly an unfortunate timing and occurrence for this mission as Now, SpaceX is going to have to dig into what happened and if there's any potential broader impact or not. The immediate knock-on effects, of course, could potentially be some of the upcoming missions that they have. Not to say that we know for sure that there will be any direct impact. Of course, we don't at this point. This just immediately happened. But SpaceX does have a number of key missions coming up in the next few days to weeks to the next month. Of course, got the Polaris Dawn mission, which is set to launch potentially as early as Friday. SpaceX also has the Crew 9 flight coming up no earlier than September 24th. And then, of course, the Europa Clipper mission on a Falcon Heavy rocket. That's coming up in October. So a lot of interested parties, of course, will be wanting to know all about this. And I'm sure SpaceX is quite eager to dig into the data and get a full understanding of what went wrong here. We do actually have a statement from SpaceX now in the last 60 seconds. SpaceX says, and I'll quote them here, after a successful ascent, Falcon 9's first stage booster tipped over following touchdown on the shortfall of Gravitas drone ship. Teams are assessing the booster's flight data and status. This was the booster's 23rd launch. As you can see here, as we're looping back through this video, though, as it was coming down and making its touchdown on the drone ship, the landing gear seemed to clearly fail almost immediately as that fire continued to burn. From a non-engineer's perspective, the rate of descent, just based off of watching and covering a number of Falcon 9 flights, the rate of descent appeared to be pretty typical for a Falcon 9 first stage booster. But again, if you missed it, just reading SpaceX's statement that just came out in the last couple of minutes now, and I quote, after a successful ascent, Falcon 9's first stage booster tipped over following touchdown on a shortfall of Gravitas drone ship. Teams are assessing the booster's flight data and status. This was the booster's 23rd launch, end quote. Of course, the second part of the mission, the deployment of the Starlink satellites, that part seems to be still on track. So there were no apparent issues with the Falcon 9 upper stage. We're now T plus 20 minutes, 30 seconds into flight. As far as the upper stage is concerned, it will continue in this parking orbit until T plus 54 minutes, 47 seconds. There will be a brief 2-second burn of that upper stage engine to circularize the orbit, setting up for these Starlink satellites to be deployed at T plus 1 hour, 3 minutes, and 41 seconds. In its statement, SpaceX made no mention of the California launch from Vandenberg Space Force Base. So at this particular moment in time, it appears as though that launch may still be moving forward, although that's something that we'll continue to watch over the next hour or so. That rocket's set to lift off at 2:58 a.m. Pacific. That's 5:58 a.m. Eastern, 09:58 UTC. Again, if SpaceX is in fact moving forward with that mission. If SpaceX decides to punt on launching again so soon this morning, they do have another backup launch opportunity for the Starlink 9-5 mission from the West Coast. Opportunities exist until, or the launch window, I should say, opens at 10:41 p.m. tomorrow evening. Again, if you're just joining us, we are covering the breaking news here on the Starlink 8-6 mission of an exceedingly rare failure for SpaceX on a booster landing. You see it right here on your screen, booster 1062 on the SpaceX fleet meeting a fiery end upon landing on the drone ship, a short fall of gravitas. A fire continued to rage, and the landing legs seem to collapse on the far side of the booster from the perspective of the drone ship camera that you see here. The booster tips over immediately before the SpaceX feed cuts out. You can see, taking a look back at the pad here, the strong back has been brought upright. As we mentioned before, of course, the Polaris Dawn mission was initially set to launch this morning. However, because of weather forecast for the end of the mission, splashdown areas around the state of Florida, teams decided to stand down from that launch opportunity both today as well as tomorrow. They're targeting, have been targeting before this anomaly no earlier than Friday, August 30th. So depending on the data review, of course, as was the case with the upper stage mishap from a different Starlink mission, SpaceX will share the information that is gathered from the booster failure here with the Polaris Dawn crew as they continue to make an assessment as thoroughly as they possibly can for that next launch attempt. And so we'll be watching closely for when that mission is rescheduled, both in terms of cooperation with the weather as well as any relevant data that has crossover to the Polaris mission. Before we go to the mission stats, just want to thank a few folks for your support this evening. We certainly appreciate it. Tim H with a $5 super chat saying, all things considered, still a great track record. It has been a quite the run for SpaceX up to this point with its successful booster landings up till now. And Jeff Hansen with a $5 super chat as well, one of our wonderful channel members, saying RIP B1062, you served us well. Yes, as we remarked during our coverage, this was the 23rd flight of this particular first stage booster. So let's look at our mission stats as we had a successful liftoff and unfortunately not so successful landing of that booster. But this was the 23rd flight, 23rd and final flight of B1062. This was the 367th Falcon 9 launch to date, the 82nd Falcon 9 flight of 2024. How did I miss that? Apologies for the typo there. This was the 310th Falcon booster reflight, or the launch of a booster that has flown at least once. This was SpaceX's 85th launch of 2024, including a Falcon Heavy mission and two Starship flights. This was SpaceX's 120th orbital launch within the last 365 days, the 202nd from Pad 40, and the 257th overall orbital launch from this pad as well. Taking a look at the bar chart here, this is where SpaceX stands on the year so far. Moving on to some recovery stats. This was, I'll throw in obviously the asterisk of having the mishap upon landing, but this was the 81st touchdown on the drone ship, shortfall of gravitas. This was the 268th drone ship landing and the 342nd overall booster landing attempt. Finally, some industry stats. This was the 60th orbital launch from Florida, the 89th from U.S. soil, the 98th from a U.S. rocket company, and the 156th orbital launch from around the world. Been 6 orbital launch failures so far, meaning to update that to 7. We'll have a discussion after our live coverage wraps up about how we want to classify this particular mission, but here's where our pie chart stands so far, with the US continuing to lead at 98 launches on the year, about 63% of the pie. China bringing it in with 24%. You have Russia at 9, Japan with 4, India with 3, Iran with 2, and the European Space Agency and North Korea with 1 apiece. And with that, we're going to go ahead and conclude our live launch coverage this evening. Want to thank briefly Tanya Stevens for a $2 super chat, who says, I saw it from Deerfield Beach for about 3 seconds. Presume she's referring to the booster land. Well, not sure if it means the booster landing or the launch itself. More likely the launch itself. Appreciate your support, though. And want to thank our friends P. Carson's with Max Q Productions, Chuck Briggs, Chuck and Jen, CNJ Images, for your support tonight. Thanks to our Michael Kane for doing some launch photography and stepping behind the tracking camera tonight. Thanks to our Spaceflight Now editor, Stephen Young, for running the technical operations of the broadcast. To our wonderful moderators in the live chat, Stephanie B. and Callistia Lee, for helping hold things down there. Most of all, thanks to you for wherever you're watching. Again, we will continue to monitor the Vandenberg launch. That will be presumably our next live launch coverage coming up in just a little bit here. Of course, we will stand by in case there are any updates to that come down in the next hour or so. Sure to keep an eye on our social channels for any relevant updates, and we'll keep our launch schedule updated as well. For all of us here at Spaceflight Now, I'm Will Robinson Smith. Remember, be good to yourselves, be good to others, and we will see you next time, folks. And until then, bye-bye.